Welcome to the Kings and Priests podcast. This is Serge Da Rosa. If you've been keeping up with me, you've probably seen that I recently released a writing entitled, Christ in You is Not Jesus in You. Well, today I want to share with you a discussion that's being had about this writing. And if you haven't had a chance to read it yet, I would encourage you to go to our website and give it a read. It's found in our blog section. It's urbanedencmty.com. Now let's get into this discussion.
Imagine finding out that the central figure of the world's largest religion didn't actually come to start a religion at all.
Right.
Like imagine instead that he came to wake you up from this massive global collective case of amnesia.
That's a wild thought.
It really is. So welcome to the deep dive. We are so glad you're here with us today because today we are looking at a premise that claims our entire modern understanding of Jesus might actually be hiding the deepest, most profound truth about ourselves.
Yeah, we are diving into an essay titled, Christ in You is Not Jesus in You.
Which is quite a title.
It is, and the core argument here is going to challenge some deeply embedded assumptions. I mean, the thesis is that Jesus wasn't just showing us what God looks like.
Right.
He was revealing what humanity looks like when it is fully alive in union with God.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because my initial reaction to this was, honestly, a bit of defensive friction.
Sure, yeah, that's natural.
Because when you start talking about redefining who Jesus is in relation to humanity, you immediately bump into centuries of very strict dogma.
Oh, absolutely. It completely reframes the historical narrative.
Yeah.
What's fascinating here is that we are so used to viewing the incarnation as this sort of divine rescue mission.
Like a superhero swooping in.
Exactly, where an external god parachutes into a broken world to execute a legal transaction and, pull a few lucky people out.
Right, the lifeboat theory.
Yeah, but this material suggests something far more integrated. It argues that the incarnation was an unmasking.
An unmasking, I like that.
It was the visible manifestation of a reality that has always been present, but that humanity had simply forgotten how to access.
And the deeper I got into the material, the more I realized it isn't trying to diminish the historical Jesus of Nazareth at all.
No, not at all.
It's actually attempting to rescue the concept of Christ from being squeezed into this tiny, manageable historical box.
We really have to look at how we use language here, because in modern parlance, Jesus Christ functions almost like a first and last name for a first century carpenter.
Right, like John Smith. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, exactly. But historically and theologically, those are two very distinct concepts.
Could I break that down for us?
So Jesus is the specific historical manifestation. It's the 33-year human biography unfolding in ancient Judea.
The guy who walked the earth.
Right. Christ, however, is the eternal reality. It is the animating divine logic of the universe.
I want to pause on that because the historical context of that concept is crucial for you to understand if you're listening to this. When the early texts talk about the word, or the logos in Greek, they weren't just talking about a spoken sentence.
Oh, no. It was a massive philosophical concept.
Yeah, in ancient philosophy, the logos was the foundational order of the cosmos. It was the divine reason holding everything together.
Right.
So when the Gospel of John says, in the beginning was the Word, it's pointing to a cosmic, eternal reality that did not just suddenly spring into existence in a manger in Bethlehem.
Precisely. The eternal Christ didn't begin at physical birth. The incarnation was simply the eternal logos entering visible history.
Entering the frame, so to speak.
Yeah, but what happens, and this is the subtle distortion the essay points out, is that religious structures tend to collapse the eternal Christ entirely into the historical Jesus.
They make them exactly the same size.
Exactly. Doctrines will technically affirm that Christ is eternal, but in practice, believers let their entire understanding of the divine be permanently restricted by the physical incarnation.
Right.
They act as if the boundary of Christ is perfectly contiguous with the boundary of Jesus of Nazareth.
To try and visualize this, I was thinking about a photograph of the ocean.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Right. Imagine an incredibly high-resolution, beautiful photograph of the Pacific Ocean taken from a specific cliff in California on a specific Tuesday.
Okay.
That photograph is real. It is a completely accurate, truthful representation of the ocean. You could point to it and say, that is the ocean.
Right, it's not a fake picture.
Exactly. But if you start believing that the ocean only exists within the four wooden corners of that picture frame.
Yeah, like that there is no water outside of what the camera captured. You have fundamentally misunderstood the nature of the ocean.
That framing captures the hazard of over-localizing the divine perfectly.
Hmm.
The photograph is the historical window.
Yeah.
It is Jesus walking in first century Israel. It is an entirely accurate, necessary revelation of the cosmic reality. But it shouldn't be used to limit the vast, boundless reality of the ocean itself.
But we do that, don't we? Human beings naturally prefer the photograph.
Oh, absolutely.
Why do you think that is? Because my immediate thought is just control.
Control is a huge part of it.
Right, because a photograph is manageable. You can hang it on a wall, you can build a shrine around it, you can dust it off on Sundays.
Yeah.
You can't control the actual ocean. The actual ocean is terrifying and demands that you learn how to swim.
Control is absolutely at the root of it. A historical figure, localized in the past, is someone you can worship from a safe distance.
Ooh, a safe distance, yes. You can codify their sayings, you can build institutions around their memory, and you can debate their historical actions without ever having to actually engage the living, present reality they were pointing toward.
Which is so much easier.
It really is. When we limit Christ to the historical frame, we miss the eternal reality that is currently sustaining all life everywhere.
Right.
We fail to realize that the incarnation wasn't Christ becoming confined to flesh, but Christ making himself visible through flesh so humanity could finally perceive what had always been there.
We obsess over the frame of the photograph and forget to jump into the water.
Exactly.
And if we look at the actual scriptural texts we have, they seem to actively resist being a complete biography anyway.
They really do.
I mean, out of a 33-year life, we have a birth narrative, a quick story about a 12-year-old in a temple, and then boom, a fast forward to a 3-year public ministry.
Right.
Out of decades of existence, we have detailed records of maybe a few dozen specific days. That is not a comprehensive biography.
It was never intended to be. The gospel accounts are highly curated, spirit-preserved witnesses to specific moments, and those moments are intended to unveil a larger reality.
Right.
They are not a day-by-day diary. If we approach them as a rigid biographical boundary for who God is, we lose the forest for the trees.
Yeah, we totally missed the point.
But to understand why that specific historical window was so desperately needed right then, we have to look at the psychological and spiritual state of the world Jesus walked into.
Right, because you can't understand the impact of the photograph without understanding how distorted humanity's view of the subject had become.
Exactly.
The premise here is that humanity cannot possibly understand itself correctly if it carries a distorted image of its origin of God.
And the ancient world was absolutely saturated with terrifying transactional images of the divine.
Let's break down that historical context for a second.
Yeah.
Because in first century Judea, you have a population that has spent centuries relating to God through highly complex covenant structures.
The temple system being the center of it all.
Right, which is a massive physical representation of separation.
The architecture itself communicated distance.
Yeah, you have the outer courts, the inner courts, the holy place.
And finally, the Holy of Holies.
Which was shielded by a massive curtain and only accessible to one specific priest on one specific day of the year, carrying the blood of a sacrifice.
It's an incredibly intense setup.
It is an incredibly visceral, bloody, noisy system built entirely around the idea that God is inherently dangerous to human beings.
Yeah.
The underlying psychological message of the temple architecture is literally, do not come near or you will die.
Keep your distance.
You need mediators, you need rituals, you need an endless river of animal blood just to keep this angry deity appeased enough to tolerate your existence.
And if you look outside of Judea, the broader Greco-Roman world was arguably worse.
Oh, totally.
The pagan mythological hierarchies were deeply rooted in fear, appeasement, and cosmic violence.
Yeah, the gods of the Roman pantheon were essentially highly powerful, incredibly petty tyrants.
They were basically superpowered humans with terrible tempers.
Right. You offered sacrifices to Jupiter or Poseidon, not out of love, but out of a desperate attempt to bribe them so they wouldn't sink your merchant ships or destroy your wheat harvest.
Exactly. In both the Jewish and the Gentile worlds, the baseline assumption was that the divine is fundamentally distant, easily offended, and requires constant management.
God was imagined as the ultimate evaluator in the sky, always watching, always judging.
Always.
And into that exact environment, a world terrified of the divine, constantly striving to earn points or avoid punishment, Jesus arrives.
Yeah.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because he drops this absolute bombshell statement. He says, if you have seen me, you have seen the Father.
Which is just, it's staggering.
That is not just a theological claim. It is a profound disruption of the entire global operating system.
It short-circuits the entire transactional economy of religion.
Yes.
Because if Jesus is the exact representation of the Father, then we have to evaluate his actions as the direct actions of God.
Right. And what is he doing? He is eating with outcasts.
He is touching lepers, which, in the purity codes of the time, was unthinkable because it supposedly made you contaminated.
Yeah, he is forgiving people who are actively in the process of executing him.
He refuses to condemn the woman caught in adultery.
Let me push this further because this is where the traditional narrative gets really uncomfortable for a lot of people.
Okay.
The traditional framing often places Jesus as the buffer between humanity and God.
The shield.
Right. The narrative says God is full of wrath, ready to destroy humanity for its sins, and Jesus steps in to absorb that wrath and appease the Father.
Yes, the penal substitution model.
Exactly. But if I'm reading this core argument correctly, Jesus did not come to change God's posture toward humanity.
No.
He didn't come to rescue us from an angry God.
That is the exact pivot point of this whole essay. If Jesus is the Father's perfect self-disclosure, then he isn't playing defense attorney against a wrathful judge.
Right.
He is showing us that the wrathful judge never actually existed.
Wow.
The distant, evaluating, easily offended deity was a projection of humanity's own trauma and separation.
We made God in our broken image.
Exactly. Jesus isn't the shield protecting us from God. He is the lens showing us that God was never the monster we imagined.
Think about the psychological relief of that shift.
Yeah.
Just for you, the listener, think about that. Because a distant God produces a separated humanity.
Yes.
A wrathful God creates deeply fearful, anxious people. If you believe your eternal destiny hinges on the mood of an evaluating deity, your entire life becomes an exercise in endless striving, performance, and insecurity.
It's exhausting.
It is. You're constantly monitoring your behavior, your thoughts, your rituals, desperately trying to prove you are worthy of existing. It's the ultimate toxic relationship.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you see that exact separation anxiety dictating so much of modern sociology today.
Oh, absolutely.
We live in a culture entirely built on performance and evaluation. We strive for status in our careers. We curate our lives on social media for validation. We compete for resources.
All driven by a deep, underlying belief that we are fundamentally lacking and must earn our right to belong.
It's the exact same psychological mechanism as the ancient sacrificial system, just translated into corporate ladders and social capital.
We just replaced animal sacrifices with burning ourselves out at 60-hour work weeks to appease the modern gods of success and relevance.
That is spot on.
But if God is perfectly revealed in the unearned nearness, the endless compassion, and the absolute lack of condemnation we see in Jesus, the foundation of that insecurity just collapses.
Right, because you no longer have to perform to earn your belovedness. It is given freely.
It's already yours.
And this revelation of the Father naturally acts as a mirror for humanity.
Okay, a mirror.
Yeah, if you finally see the Creator clearly, free from the distortions of fear and transaction, you finally have the capacity to see the created clearly.
Which brings us to the deepest, most challenging part of this entire framework.
Yeah, this is the crux of the essay.
Because if God isn't the distant, evaluating boss in the sky, then who are we?
Right.
The material suggests that humanity's primary problem wasn't moral failure. It wasn't that we were breaking a set of arbitrary rules.
No.
The deeper tragedy was a profound, catastrophic loss of identity. We had forgotten our origin.
The author refers to it as functioning from alienation.
Alienation.
Yeah. The genesis of humanity, according to the ancient poetry of the scriptures, is that we are made in the image and likeness of God.
Right.
But over generations, humanity constructed an existence shaped entirely by separation, fear, shame, and survival.
We see that beautifully mapped out in the Genesis narrative itself.
The garden story.
Yeah. The moment humanity buys into the illusion of separation, what happens? They hide.
They cover themselves.
They cover themselves with fig leaves. They become terrified of the very divine presence that gave them life. And honestly, we've been hiding behind fig leaves ever since.
Oh, definitely.
Whether those leaves are religious piety, intellectual arrogance, or material wealth, we just want to hide.
So when the Logos, the eternal Christ, steps into the human experience as Jesus of Nazareth, the primary mission is not just to demonstrate what divinity looks like.
Right.
It is to reveal true humanity to itself.
Wow.
It is to show us what human life looks like when it is completely free from the amnesia of separation.
I think the most powerful way to understand this is to look at Jesus as a mirror rather than a pedestal.
Yes. That's a great distinction.
Because the traditional approach is to put Jesus on this unreachable pedestal. We look up at him and say, look at how perfect he is. Look at his miracles. He is the Son of God, and we are just wretched sinners. We could never be like him.
Right, we distance ourselves.
But the text explicitly argues against this. Jesus was never demonstrating that he was an exception for us to admire from a distance.
The language of exception versus blueprint is vital here.
Blueprint.
If we treat Jesus purely as an exception, a categorically different type of being who has access to a divine reality that is permanently off limits to us, it actually serves as a massive psychological defense mechanism.
Oh, I bet. And my guess is that religion made him the exception, because it's much easier to build a hierarchical power structure around an untouchable God than a shared brotherhood.
Absolutely.
If Jesus is fundamentally, categorically different from us, then we need a priestly class. We need institutional mediation. We need a bureaucracy to access him.
Right.
Does the historical development of the church bear that out? Like, is that actually what happened?
It absolutely does. I mean, in the first few centuries, particularly before Christianity became the state religion of the Roman Empire, the language of the early church was highly focused on participation and union.
Okay.
Early theologians like Irenaeus or Athanasius famously said things like, God became man so that man might become God.
Wow.
Meaning sharing in the divine nature.
Right.
But as the church institutionalized, especially post-Constantine, it adopted the hierarchical structures of the Roman Empire.
It became an empire itself.
Exactly. Jesus was elevated to a distant imperial pansecrator, the ruler of all, and a strict division was created between the clergy and the laity.
So they built a toll booth.
Yes. Making Jesus the unapproachable exception allowed institutions to insert themselves as the necessary toll booths on the road to God.
And on a personal level, making him the exception lets us entirely off the hook.
How completely?
If I look at Jesus loving his enemies or living completely free from anxiety about his status, and I say, well, he's God, so of course he could do that. I'm only human.
Right. I can't be expected to do that.
Exactly. That I don't have to change a single thing about my life. I can comfortably remain in my anxiety, my petty grievances, and my ego-driven striving because my humanity is supposedly permanently flawed.
But if he is the blueprint, if he is the revelation of what humanity is actually designed to be, then his unbroken awareness of union with God is supposed to be our unbroken awareness.
And that demands a complete dismantling of how we live.
It does. It changes everything.
Let's look at a specific metaphor to ground this, because the implications are massive. Let's move away from the traditional religious language and think about this psychologically.
Okay, think about a story of a wealthy heir who is kidnapped as an infant and raised in absolute crushing poverty.
Like a Charles Dickens novel.
Exactly. This heir grows up believing they are a beggar. They spend their entire life scraping by, fighting for scraps of bread in the gutter, terrified of starvation, deeply insecure.
Just total survival mode.
Right. And viewing everyone else as a competitor for limited resources. Their entire personality, their sociology, their worldview is shaped by the absolute conviction of scarcity and separation.
Because that's all they've ever known.
Yeah. Then, one day, the older sibling, who was not kidnapped and knows the truth of the family identity, finds them in the street.
Okay, and the older sibling doesn't show up to demand that the beggars start acting more politely.
No.
They don't hand them a list of moral rules to follow to eventually earn a place in the palace.
Wash your face and maybe you can come inside. No.
Right. They show up to reveal the truth of their shared identity. They say, you are fighting for scraps in the gutter, but your name is on the deed to the entire estate. The wealth of the family has always been yours.
Exactly. And the beggar's transformation won't happen through external behavior modification.
Right.
It will only happen through an internal awakening to their true identity. When we look at the life of Jesus, we are looking at the older sibling who knows the family name.
Oh, that's beautiful.
We see a life functioning from union rather than alienation, authority without domination, holiness without separation, power free from ego.
You see this so clearly in the narratives of his life.
Yeah.
Look at the story of the temptations in the desert. The adversary keeps saying, if you are the Son of God, turn these stones to bread. Prove it. Perform a miracle to establish your status.
And Jesus essentially refuses to play the game.
He doesn't need to perform a trick to prove an identity that is already securely rooted in union.
Exactly.
Or look at him sleeping in the boat during a massive storm. The disciples are terrified, operating from an assumption of scarcity and vulnerability.
They think they're going to die.
Yeah, but Jesus is resting. He's operating from an assumption of absolute, secure union with the source of life.
He wasn't striving for sonship. He wasn't performing for the approval of the crowds or the religious leaders.
Wrong.
He lived from an already realized belovedness. He demonstrated provision without striving and protection rooted in deep trust.
Now think about your daily life for a second. Think about the friction in your workplace, the tension in your family dynamics, the quiet anxieties that keep you awake at 2 a.m.
We all have them.
We do. How much of that stress is directly tied to the bigger mindset?
Yeah.
Trying to prove you are smart enough, successful enough, attractive enough, or spiritual enough? How much of your energy is spent defending a fragile ego because you believe you are separate and vulnerable?
A lot.
What if the baseline of your existence is actually absolute union with the divine source of life?
It's the ultimate antidote to human exhaustion.
It really is.
If we are witnessing the visible manifestation of what life looks like when humanity functions fully from the reality of Christ, then we are looking at an invitation to lay down the heavy burden of our self-constructed identities.
But this naturally leads to a massive logistical question, which the essay tackles next.
Right.
Because we can look at the historical Jesus and say, okay, that's the blueprint. That is what true humanity looks like.
Yeah.
But how do we actually bridge the gap? Because historically speaking, Jesus leaves.
He departs.
And the author points out one of the most counterintuitive statements in the entire biblical narrative. Jesus tells his closest followers that it is actually good for him to go away.
It is a baffling statement on the surface, and it cuts directly against our human instincts.
Completely.
The disciples have spent 3 years with the ultimate teacher, healer, and friend. He provides perfectly for them, and then he says, "It is to your advantage that I depart."
So what does this all mean? Because I would push back hard if I were sitting there.
Oh, of course.
If you have a physical companion who can heal the sick, feed thousands, and silence a storm, you would never want them to leave.
Never.
You'd say, no, stay right here, be our king, set up a physical throne in Jerusalem, and fix everything. It seems completely backwards to suggest that an internal, invisible reality could somehow be better than a physical Jesus sitting next to you giving you direct advice.
But that resistance reveals the very limitation of a physical incarnation.
Okay, explain that.
We have to look at the developmental psychology of dependency here. As long as Jesus is a physical figure standing beside them, humanity remains in a state of perpetual adolescence.
Adolescence.
Yeah, they are dependent on an external leader. The disciples constantly outsource their authority to him. It was always, Jesus, handle this crowd. Jesus, heal this person. Jesus, tell us what to do.
Right. The charismatic founder syndrome.
Exactly.
You see it in startups, you see it in political movements. As long as the visionary founder is in the room, nobody else steps up to take true ownership. Everyone just looks to the head of the table for the answer.
Exactly. If Jesus remains permanently localized in a physical body in the Middle East, then the divine reality is bottlenecked by geography and time.
Right. He can only be in one room at a time.
God present beside humanity is an incredible historical moment, but it is deeply limited. His departure marked a necessary, fundamental maturation process.
It was the transition.
Yes, it was the transition to the unveiling of Christ as realized life within humanity.
The essay references the Apostle Paul here, which I think is a fascinating historical pivot.
It is.
Because Paul is writing just a couple of decades after the historical events, and his theology is profoundly internal.
Very internal.
He talks about Christ in you, the hope of glory. He explicitly states that we should know Christ no longer according to the flesh, meaning we have to stop focusing on the physical, historical parameters of Jesus of Nazareth.
Paul understood that the baton had been passed. The author presses hard on this, raising a critical question for modern religious adherents. This raises an important question. Are we waiting for an external rescue, or are we being invited to awaken to an internal reality?
This is a direct challenge to the eschatology, the theology of the end times, that dominates so much of modern Western religion.
Oh, it completely upends it.
There are massive theological systems built entirely around waiting for Jesus to physically return on a cloud, crack open the sky, judge the wicked, and physically fix the broken structures of the world.
Right.
It's a theology of delay and external rescue.
And the essay argues that fixating on a physical return, a physical kingdom, or a physical temple keeps humanity perpetually looking outward for what the texts announce inwardly.
Outward instead of inward.
Yeah. If you are constantly looking to the sky, waiting for the photograph to come back to life, you are ignoring the ocean you are currently swimming in.
Oh, wow. That ties right back to the ocean analogy.
The departure was the point. The life that was localized in him is now democratized within humanity.
It's the ultimate shift from admiration to participation. We are not supposed to be an audience cheering for an external savior. We are supposed to be the active vessels of the reality he introduced.
Exactly.
But acknowledging Christ within intellectually is one thing. If we transition to the practical reality of this, how does a person actually engage this internal presence?
Right.
Like, how does it change the way we function on a Tuesday morning?
But the author is incredibly practical in the next section. Engaging the internal reality starts with a foundational paradigm-shifting recognition.
Okay.
There has never been a separation to overcome.
I want to let that land because it contradicts almost everything we are taught in traditional religious spaces.
Yes.
There's never been a separation to overcome.
We were never outside of God to begin with. The text points out that one of religion's greatest distortions has been convincing people that the spiritual life consists primarily of moving toward God.
Like it's a journey.
Yeah, it creates a spatial metaphor of distance. God is up there, we are down here, and our job is to climb a ladder of morality, piety, and correct doctrine to eventually get close enough to be accepted.
It's the feeling of trying to paddle a canoe upstream against a raging river.
That's a perfect analogy.
You are constantly fighting the current of your own supposed sinful nature, exhausting yourself trying to reach the calm waters of the divine presence at the headwaters.
Yeah.
You're trying to become something you are not.
But this material argues that life is no longer about becoming what we are not, but expressing what we already are.
Expressing instead of becoming.
It's a shift from acquiring to awakening. You aren't paddling upstream to find God. You realize your very existence is sustained by the river itself.
Right.
You turn the canoe around, put the paddles down, and let the current do the work. You live from union. You don't fight for it.
The essay uses a profound, simple biological analogy here that I loved. Everything in existence reproduces according to its own nature.
It's a fundamental law.
Right. An apple seed produces an apple tree. A wolf gives birth to a wolf. It is a fundamental law of reproduction. So if humanity is truly born of God, as the ancient scriptures claim, if God is the source and origin of human life, then humanity must bear the divine nature.
The source determines what emerges from it.
Right.
This directly challenges the doctrine of total human depravity, which insists that humanity is fundamentally corrupt and entirely devoid of any inherent divine goodness.
Which is such a dark way to view ourselves.
It is. If God is our origin, then our core nature, beneath all the layers of trauma, ego, and amnesia, is divine life.
And this leads the author to completely redefine our understanding of the word supernatural.
Yes.
Because we usually use that word to describe spooky, magical interventions, right? Ghosts, floating objects, or sudden miraculous healings where God breaks the laws of physics to zap a tumor.
Yeah, we view the supernatural as an alien invasion of the natural world.
Exactly. But the text argues that things like unconditional love, deep wisdom, startling creativity, and profound physical or emotional healing aren't borrowed from an external alien source.
No, they aren't.
They aren't magical interventions zapping down from the sky. They are the natural outworking of the divine life already present within humanity.
What religion has categorized as supernatural is often nothing more than humanity finally functioning naturally from the awareness of what it truly is.
Think about what that means for your daily experience.
It's profound.
The next time you feel a sudden deep well of compassion for a stranger who is struggling, or you experience a flash of creative intuition that perfectly solves a complex problem,
Yeah.
or you find a reservoir of grace to forgive someone who betrayed you, you are not experiencing a momentary external intervention by a distant God.
You are experiencing your truest self.
You are expressing the Christ within. The divine life is bubbling up through your unique personality and circumstances.
It demystifies the divine in the most beautiful, empowering way. It grounds the reality of God in our everyday, tactile human experience.
And the cascading effects of this realization are enormous. Because if we really believe this, if we internalize that our truest nature is a shared divine origin, it completely incinerates the way we view sociology, ethics, and human division.
This is where the theology fundamentally rewires how we live in community.
The logic is undeniable. If all human life originates in the divine, then humanity shares a common origin that is infinitely deeper than race, nationality, political ideology, or religious affiliation.
Right.
All the categories we use to violently separate ourselves begin to collapse.
The illusions of us versus them, clean versus unclean, sacred versus secular, they completely disintegrate.
They have to.
Tribalism relies on the belief that my group is favored by the divine and your group is either rejected by the divine or entirely disconnected from it.
Which justifies all sorts of terrible things.
Exactly. But if Christ is the life within all humanity, tribalism becomes a profound absurdity.
The essay says that if all life originates in love, then to encounter another human being is to encounter one who shares the exact same origin.
Yes.
And suddenly, love ceases to be a heavy moral instruction imposed from above. It's no longer an external God wagging a finger saying, you would better love your neighbor or I will punish you.
Which never really works anyway.
Right. Love becomes the natural, unavoidable expression of recognizing a shared origin. You love the other person because you recognize they are part of the exact same ocean you are.
To harm them is to harm yourself.
It's the ultimate, unbreakable foundation for human empathy.
And it carries a massive practical mandate for how we function in the world. The author writes that because of this shared internal reality, we can no longer wait for heaven to move or God to act externally.
Okay, let's explore the friction there because that statement is a massive paradigm shift.
It is.
Traditional religion is deeply invested in the posture of waiting.
Very much so.
We hold prayer vigils, asking God to come down and stop a war. We beg God to intervene in our broken political systems. We ask God to fix the poverty in our neighborhoods.
Right.
We're constantly asking the external deity to do the heavy lifting.
And the essay suggests that God has already placed the mechanism for that transformation inside of us.
Us.
Yeah, if divine life is already present within humanity, then the responsibility for bringing justice, peace, and healing into the world rests firmly on our shoulders.
We are the vehicle.
We are the very means through which divine life expresses itself on earth. The peace the world is desperately praying for is meant to move through us. The healing moves through us.
But doesn't that put a terrifying amount of pressure on us?
I mean, it sounds like it initially.
Because I look at humanity, I look at my own life, and we are incredibly flawed, distracted, and prone to selfishness.
Too.
Handing the keys of global transformation to human beings seems like a recipe for absolute disaster. Are we really supposed to fix the world with our limited willpower?
I think we have to reframe the source of the power. It's not your human ego or your sheer force of will that is tasked with fixing the world.
Okay.
If the burden of transformation were placed solely on our separated, anxious selves, yes, we would shatter under the weight of it.
We definitely would.
But the text isn't saying, try harder to be a good person and fix the planet. It's saying the burden is placed on the divine life that naturally flows through us when we simply get our egos out of the way.
It's the current of the river doing the work, not my exhausted arms paddling.
Exactly.
It's about becoming a clear channel rather than a straining engine.
Precisely. And this leads the author to introduce the concept of governance.
Now, when we hear governance, we usually think of politics, legislation, running for city council.
Right, bureaucratic stuff.
But in this context, it means something much more intimate and profound.
It means stewardship.
Stewardship.
Yeah, awakening to Christ within means intentionally stewarding the specific field of life you have been given. You are called to govern your own body, your immediate relationships, your family dynamics, your workplace, your local community.
So it's very local.
Very local. You stop viewing these as mundane, secular spaces and begin to see them as the exact territories where divine life is meant to find expression through you.
This is where it gets incredibly real for our daily lives.
Yeah.
Look at your current job, look at the people you share a home with, look at the neighborhood you drive through every day.
All of it.
This material suggests that you are the exact vessel through which divine wisdom, patience, and creativity are meant to enter those specific physical spaces.
You aren't just passing through.
No. You aren't a passive observer waiting for life to happen, and you aren't waiting for a miraculous intervention from the sky. You are the active, governing expression of the divine in that tense boardroom meeting.
In that frustrating traffic jam.
Yes, in that difficult conversation with a family member.
It restores a remarkable, almost staggering dignity to human existence.
It really does.
We are not just biological accidents trying to survive a harsh universe. We are intended to govern the spaces we inhabit with the authority of love.
And that profound dignity is perfectly captured in the final, beautiful metaphor the text uses to describe this awakened state of humanity.
I love this part.
This is where the theological theory lands as a deeply personal reality.
The concept of being crowned with Christ.
The author points out that ancient scriptures declare humanity is crowned with glory and honor, and that Christ in us is the hope of glory.
Right.
Therefore, following the logic, humanity has essentially been crowned with Christ.
We have to unpack what a crown actually represents in historical and cultural terms.
Yeah, it's not just a hat.
A crown is never just a piece of decorative jewelry. It is a symbol of profound weight.
It establishes identity.
Yes.
It confers authority. It assigns a heavy responsibility. It fundamentally alters how an individual exists in the world.
Think about a coronation. If a person is just standing in a crowd, they are one of many. Their actions carry personal consequences, but they don't shift the destiny of a nation.
Right?
But the moment a crown is placed on their head, their entire function changes. Their words carry the weight of law. Their posture must change to bear the physical and symbolic weight of the metal.
They literally stand differently.
Exactly. If humanity has truly been crowned with the divine life of Christ, we can no longer view ourselves through diminished, pathetic categories of weakness, passivity, or total depravity.
We do not move through life empty, lacking, or begging. We bear this glory right now.
Right now.
It reminds me of the hidden royal trope in epic literature.
Oh, yeah, like King Arthur or Aragorn.
Exactly. You have a character who grows up in a small village thinking they are a nobody. They accept being pushed around, they live in fear, they believe their life has no overarching significance.
That's a normal peasant.
And then the revelation comes. They are the true heir to the throne.
And what happens in those stories, the moment they realize they wear the crown, their external circumstances might not change immediately.
Right, they might still be in the village.
But their internal posture completely transformed.
You don't slouch when you know you're wearing a crown.
No, you don't.
You don't cower in fear when you realize you have authority. You don't beg for scraps when you know you hold the keys to the storehouse.
That's it, exactly.
The realization of identity changes the absolute mechanics of how you walk into a room.
And bringing it all together, the essay suggests that our greatest struggle as human beings hasn't been the absence of God or the overwhelming power of darkness.
What has it been?
Our greatest struggle has been our simple, tragic failure to recognize what we've already been given.
We've been acting like terrified peasants while wearing the crown of the cosmos.
Exact.
We've been staring at a beautiful photograph of the ocean, dying of thirst, completely unaware that we are standing waist deep in the water.
The ultimate purpose of the incarnation, the reason the Logos became visible in Jesus of Nazareth, was never to generate a new religion of external admiration.
Right.
It was to awaken our active participation in the very reality he unveiled. As the author concludes so powerfully, Christ is no longer merely admired. Christ is manifest.
Manifested. Wow.
When we step into this participation, life ceases to be a desperate, exhausted pursuit of a distant God and becomes a joyful, natural expression of our truest selves.
What an incredible paradigm shift.
It really is.
Just to trace the massive arc of what we've explored today, we started by breaking the frame of the photograph, moving past the limitation of seeing Christ solely as a 33-year historical biography.
Right.
We look at how Jesus unmasked the Father, completely destroying the terrifying illusion of a distant, wrathful God that demands our endless striving.
Yeah.
From there, we explored the amnesia of humanity, seeing Jesus not as an untouchable exception to the rule deity meant to let us off the hook, but as the perfect blueprint of a human fully alive in union.
The older brother showing us who we are.
Exactly. We unpacked the necessity of his departure, the shift from external dependency to internal awakening. And finally, we realized that we are called to govern our daily lives, our relationships, and our world with love and authority, because we have already been crowned with the divine life.
It dismantles the anxiety of separation and replaces it with a deep peace of union.
It really does. And as we wrap up, we want to leave you with a final, lingering thought to mull over.
Yeah, something to take with you.
We've covered a vast amount of historical, theological, and psychological ground today, but let's make it intensely practical for your reality right now.
If the core premise we've discussed today is actually true, if there is genuinely no separation between you and the divine source of life, and you do not have to perform, strive, or earn your way back into its good graces.
How does that change the very first thing you do when you wake up tomorrow morning?
Yeah. If you finally stopped exhausting yourself trying to bridge a gap that simply doesn't exist, what would you have the energy to create instead?
That is the question that changes everything. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Whether you are commuting, working, or just taking a walk, we hope this exploration shifts something deeply meaningful for you today. Keep questioning the boundaries, keep exploring the depths of the ocean, and remember the crown you already wear. Until next time.
Kings and Priests Podcast is a ministry of Urban Eden. To learn more about us, to get resources, and to find details on our monthly gatherings in Tulsa, Oklahoma, visit the website urbanedencmty.com and consider sowing a financial seed to help us spread the message of God's kingdom. Visit the website for details.